Welcome, everyone, to the Find Your Flow podcast by Highland Yoga, hosted by founder Elsie Brotherton and co-hosts Reedy Dukes and Annalie Burke. Highland Yoga is an Atlanta-based hot yoga studio founded in 2015 in the quaint neighborhood of Virginia Highlands. And it's hard to wrap our minds around just how much we've grown and evolved since then. We already know our community is hooked on whatever magic is within our walls, and we want to offer you more outside of that. We can't wait to dive deep into all things yoga and wellness, but more importantly, what makes our world go round: our teachers, our devoted students, our community offerings, and more. Thanks for tuning into the podcast. Hey everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of the Find Your Flow podcast with Highland Yoga. I'm your host, Reedy Dukes. I'm a full-time teacher with Highland Yoga, and I really love this part of my job. And today we have Shannon DiCarlo here, and we're going to talk about a lot of things geared towards yoga and meditation and more. Shannon, thanks for being here.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Yeah, so I usually start every episode by asking about your yoga journey, how you found yoga, what your life was like when you started, and how that's evolved over time.
Yeah, okay, cool. So, it used to be sort of a vulnerable topic for me of like how I found yoga and also meditation, but it's become something that I kind of wear as a badge of honor and that I love to talk about. So, I found yoga during sort of this pivotal point in my life where I was sort of learning how to manage OCD and anxiety. So I didn't really know what was wrong for a really long time. I don't know if, like, with anyone with like sort of like a mental health journey, getting a diagnosis is sometimes like the most powerful thing ever, because then you finally go, oh, that's what. So it's not like I was just, you're sort of like trying everything. And that's what I was doing. I was sort of trying all these different things and methods and discovering new just exercises like hypnosis, like anything to help calm my nervous system and kind of really understand like what was going on with me before I realized like, oh, I have clinical OCD and like generalized anxiety. And so
Mm-hmm.
because of that, it really I started to realize that once I found meditation, that was my first kind of opening into discovering yoga. And so I found meditation and I just found myself, I was that person who was like, I don't know if I can sit here for 10 minutes, 15 minutes because my mind is racing, And then, once I started to research meditation, and it turns out you don't have to necessarily sit in one spot for a long time and, just kind of like be with your thoughts. There are guided meditations and there are walking meditations, like, if you're a wiggly person or like have a ton of energy in your body. And so it really meditation and researching meditation and becoming a certified mindfulness and meditation teacher opened up this other part where it kind of it's sort of like organically opened up this journey to yoga, where I started taking yoga classes and I started taking them online during the pandemic, like sort of with YouTube. And I realized that that also was calming my nervous system in a really beautiful way. And it was almost like a moving meditation where you're focused on the posture and you're focused on, um, you know, listening to your body and going within and understanding, okay, when the teacher's instructing you, like, focusing on the instruction is getting you out of the autopilot and into the present moment. And so it was this sort of like moving meditation that I again loved so much that I became a certified yoga teacher, because I just can't like do anything half-ass.
Yeah.
It's like, but also it's because my curiosity, I was so curious to learn both with meditation first and then with yoga, like what is actually happening in our anatomy that's creating this sense of peace and this sense of connection and this sense of like, what is that breath to body connection? Why is it important? And that's why I became certified, is because I wanted to just learn about what was happening when we were doing something like downward dog, or, the simple practice. And, why is it important to, make sure that the postures are, you're doing it correctly, and that, it's not just to prevent injuries, which is a big deal, obviously, for us teachers, but there's also an intentionality to really craft your craft of yoga, of like really understanding, like from the fingers to the wrists to the shoulders to everything, the connection that really like sort of became a grounding practice that helped me get out of my head. And it was what I now realize is just this form of moving meditation. And so for those who struggle with like sitting still and like quieting the mind in a corner somewhere, I think that yoga is such a fantastic alternative, because you're essentially like meditating without realizing it, but you're still receiving the incredible benefits and beyond of meditation.
Yeah, I agree. I think for me at least, being present and tuned in to me is more accessible when I'm moving, like in a yoga class versus seated meditation. But I've tried both, and it kind of ebbs and flows with life seasons, I think. And I wanted to go back just to the level that you're comfortable answering. I want to hear more about like how anxiety and OCD, like what challenges that presented for you in your daily life, and kind of I think the term OCD is kind of thrown around pretty
Yeah.
casually, and it's kind of like it's not really just about you need your pillows to be like in the perfect position. Like, I don't think that necessarily means. So if you can speak more to that, I think that'd be helpful.
Yeah, and again, I think that there's probably a huge sort of spectrum, like
Yeah.
everything, that where you may have, sort of, you might be a sort of compulsive about certain things, like pillows
Mhm.
being in the right place, but it doesn't sort of, I think where it becomes, oh, I need to focus on figuring this out and talk to a professional about this, and like maybe seek some professional help, is when it starts to affect your daily life. I think that's kind of like the
Mhm.
signal of like, okay, every day I'm by nature just a positive, like optimistic, always listening to like motivational speaking on my way to work kind of thing, like just always like, this will work out, like we will get through this, like that kind of mentality. When, so OCDs, so at sort of like, again, I'm not a doctor or psychologist by any means, or psychiatrist, but for me, it was these sort of what they call intrusive thoughts. And the term intrusive is meaning that like they're unwanted. So it's
Mhm.
sort of like a thought that you don't want to be there. And it comes in, and it turns out like almost everyone, like there's like about like, maybe I don't know the percentage, maybe like 1 to 5% of people who don't have intrusive thoughts, but most people have intrusive thoughts where it's like a thought that might be like a little uncomfortable, or you might be like, ooh, like what, that's weird, or no, I would never want that to happen. But it's the people who have like obsessive compulsive disorder, that intrusive thought will marinate, and then your brain latches onto it, and you almost like can't get out of not thinking of it. So you think,
Mhm.
it's that whole like thing about like, don't think of a pink elephant. And the more
Mhm.
you, so I think our first instincts are to say like, don't think about that. That's an uncomfortable thought, or like that brings up uncomfortable emotions. So don't think about that. And the more you say that, the more your brain is going, so wait, we should focus on that, because your brain is wired to protect you. And when
Mhm.
you're sort of, when your body starts to respond to you getting fearful of those thoughts, so your heart starts to beat a little bit faster, you might shake, like your body might just start to shake. It just depends on everyone's body and how they've held sort of, whether you call it trauma, whether it's, maybe it's just that you're wired that way. They don't really have a whole lot of evidence of like if it's nature versus nurture. Um, but whatever it is, your body starts to respond. And when
Mhm.
your body starts to, let's say you might be holding yourself really tight because you're like kind of scared, but you don't realize you're holding yourself tight. When your body is like that, your brain will start to get into high gear and go, uh oh, we should be doing something about this because
Mhm.
she's all tensed up, which means we need to fight or flight. It's like that kind of caveman kind of going all the way back to like just sort of your basic instincts of your brain trying to protect you. And so what sometimes happens with OCD is that you avoid that thing
Mhm.
that you think is going to happen. Like you might think like, oh, this is a fearful thought and I need to avoid that so that it doesn't happen, when really in your rational side of your brain goes, that's totally irrational, it's
Mhm.
totally not something you should be afraid of, but it doesn't make it any less scary inside your head. But also when your body, again, sometimes if we're holding tight or sometimes if we're not breathing, we don't realize it. If you're not mindful,
Mhm.
you might not realize that you've been holding your breath because you're thinking of something, and then it's all connected. The minute your body starts to tense or the minute your body starts to hold its breath, your brain will start to kick in and go, uh-oh, let's put a lot of
Yeah.
attention on this thought. The thought that she wants to go away so bad. It's like, no, let's put a lot of attention on this thought because we need to protect her. And we need to think of all the possibilities of how to protect her, which could be avoiding. It could be, just these little habits that you pick up to sort of like almost protect yourself from this very, usually a very irrational sort of unwanted thought.
Uh-huh.
So where mindfulness comes in is, and where yoga comes in, is first of all, yoga calming the nervous system down. When
Mhm.
your body is relaxed, your mind will follow. And I'm sure you know that as a yoga instructor. And it is so true. Sometimes it still happens sometimes where I'll get like just sort of a thought that's just random. It's completely random. And it's funny because when you think about thoughts, like there are no original thoughts. We are being influenced by ads, by things we just might have overheard on the news on our way to the gym. Someone might have said something to you, and then your brain sort of has all these little puzzle pieces that at some point it puts it together into this thought that you're fearful of or that is like uncomfortable or ooh, like that is like I don't want that. And then here you go. You can see my whole body is already doing it where my
Mhm.
shoulders are coming up to my ears and I'm like going, ooh, I don't want that. But when in yoga, when we, pay attention and we relax our shoulders and we breathe and we really think about that breath reaching our bellies or reaching our hearts and opening our chests, and you're almost sort of in yoga, like you're actually releasing a lot of that energy that your body is holding on to. And as I'm sure know, like especially in the hips, that's something I learned by being a yoga practitioner and also being a yoga teacher, is that our bodies have memories. So again,
Mhm.
wherever the cause is, or what came first, the chicken or the egg, doesn't really matter. It's more
Mhm.
about what do we do with it now. And through yoga, I tell my students, like, if you feel emotional after practice today, it may be because we're doing a lot of hip openers. So
Mhm.
just be mindful of that. Maybe take a minute before you get in your car and drive off, maybe just take a moment in class. If you want to talk, I'm here, to chat. But hip openers, the reason why they bring up so many emotions that you may not even know, it might not be a cognitive thought, you might just be emotional. And you go, what the heck? What is that coming from? It's because the hips hold a lot of negative emotions, energy, trauma. And you're like, what do you mean our bodies are holding on to that? But it's true. Like, I don't know if you have any experience with that, with our bodies like having memories and then releasing those things, those negative emotions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I even like thinking about meditation, I when you mentioned like the intrusive thoughts, I think and I do think that's something that's kind of on a spectrum because I think everybody has, certain thought loops that replay that are unwanted and obviously some are way more intrusive and like problematic, but at least for me when I started doing seated meditation, like I started yoga first and then I got more into mindfulness meditation. And I remember it was also a period of time for me where I was having unwanted, like problematic thoughts that were producing a lot of anxiety. And my experience was when you're sitting, it's like these thoughts get totally amplified, and then it's like, oh, now what do I do? That this like has been brought to the surface. So, can you speak to what it can be like as a brand new
Uh,
practitioner of like a seated
I
meditation?
love that. And I love that question. I love that that was your experience. And there's so many things that um I want to speak to you on this because even as a seasoned meditation practitioner, whatever you want to call it, like a meditator, we'll just say, there are days where you get out of a meditation and you're like, ah, I feel peaceful. There's a train that comes by.
Oh, it's okay. I don't hear it.
Oh, you don't hear it?
Uh-uh.
I do. I'm just kidding. It's like shaking my window. No. So, even as someone who practices every day, there are certain days where you walk out of that meditation, you go, wow, I feel calm, I feel peaceful, or I feel whatever it is that, maybe came up that day that you maybe got rid of, or you were able to sort of like come out of it and go, okay, I'm ready for the day. Some days, whether you've been practicing for 5 minutes or 5 years, you walk away and go, ooh, like I feel real on edge today, or I feel like things are bothering me more, but I just spent all this time meditating this morning. Because here's one thing that I loved. It's one of my favorite Buddhist monks or Buddhist nuns to listen to. Her name is Robina Corton, and she's this, I think, Australian Buddhist nun. And I love her because she keeps it real, but she's like this Buddhist nun. And when she talks, you're going like, I didn't know Buddhist nuns were allowed to like say things like that, but she keeps it real. She talks about Buddhism as a working hypothesis. It does not have to be a religion. It doesn't have to be, it's just a working hypothesis. And if you want to like listen to the practice and some things that she has to say and like, take what you want, maybe leave what doesn't resonate. One thing that she said when I listened to one of her like YouTube shorts was like, it was about when you meditate, you are basically having to pull out the weeds in your mind in order for new flowers to grow.
Hmm.
And pulling out the weeds can be very uncomfortable. But in order for new flowers to grow, that practice is essential. And it can be uncomfortable and it will be uncomfortable. So I say that so that even when you've been practicing for, and it feels like you're on a good, oh wow, this is like life changing. I've been practicing for 5, 10 minutes every day and I feel good. I feel energized. There might be a day where you've been pulling out weeds and it might feel a little bit more uncomfortable than the day before. And that's
Hmm.
natural and normal. And that's you actually doing the work to make space, because those are all those weeds. Those are all those things that you're trying to sort of bring to the surface and then do the practice of acknowledging without labeling,
Hmm.
without saying, oh, this is a bad thought or a good thought. There are no bad or good thoughts. It's just the thought. And again, if you can think about it as if this isn't even my original thought, this is something that my brain has sort of pieced together from looking at different ads. Maybe a commercial came by, maybe I heard something on the news, and it sort of pieced it together and it came up with this thought that I happen to be uncomfortable with. So
Hmm.
when you sort of take the seat of the observer, and again, it's not necessarily an easy thing to do, but you have to just remind yourself, like, okay, oh, I feel myself getting elevated, or I feel my heart getting a little bit more like
Hmm.
beating a little faster, and I feel like this is an uncomfortable thought. Noticing it and catching it, that's the practice. So whether you're
Hmm.
having a peaceful meditation or one that's a little bit more uncomfortable, the practice is still to notice when a thought enters the mind. And then number two, like step two, is to do the practice of trying not to label it as good or bad, trying not to
Hmm.
label it and just observe it. And then eventually, just like a cloud in the sky, when you're sitting in a field and you're just looking up at the clouds, some clouds move really quickly, some move at a snail's pace, but by the time you look back up, that cloud is over here to the left and you go, oh, I didn't realize it moved because it was moving
Hmm.
so slowly. Those are our thoughts. If you can just allow it to be there, as
Hmm.
uncomfortable as it is, if you can just allow it to breathe there and remind yourself to breathe, remind yourself that your body is relaxed. Because if your body follows, your brain's just going to keep trying to go, hey, hey, we need to pay attention to this. And really, you don't. You really don't need to pay attention to it. Just let it be there. And eventually, like a cloud in the sky, it will pass. But the more you put attention on it, and the more you label it and say it's good or bad, or this is who I am, or who am I to think of something like this, like all of a sudden your brain is going to go, oh, we need to pay attention to that because we need to protect this person. So we need to fight or flight. And then that's when your body starts to tense up, and that's when you stop breathing. And that's when your shoulders get close to your ears. So, just kind of reminding yourself, even if it takes over and over and over again of going, oh, I just caught myself doing it again. Nothing bad, nothing wrong with it. I'm still practicing. Let me see if I can just sit and look at this. And the way I describe it too, when I was first starting, and even now sometimes, it's almost like watching a scary movie that you can't close your eyes. And it's really like
Yeah.
it's heartbreaking sometimes, and it's frustrating. And I want to acknowledge that like I feel that. And I felt it big time back before I found yoga and before I found meditation, that gosh, doing that meditation when I first started was like, this is like watching a scary movie and you can't close your eyes and you just have to sit there and watch it. But then it does move. Trust me, it will move if you
Mm-hmm.
allow yourself to continue to bring yourself back to that thought of saying, it's not a bad thought, it's not a good thought, it's just a thought.
Uh-huh. And you're speaking, I'm just assuming you're speaking specifically to mindfulness meditation, because there are, right, the different types of meditation and um, various different goals, I think. Like, I think sometimes when people think meditation, it's like the goal is to clear your mind of all, outside sensations and just like achieve this like blank bliss. And I think mindfulness meditation is a little more realistic, I would say, and maybe more accessible, especially to uh like kind of the American hustle bustle culture. So can you speak to like mindfulness compared to other types of meditations?
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. So
Or
yeah,
just maybe what is define mindfulness, what that kind of
right.
means?
So mindfulness is just about sitting in stillness. It's about bringing awareness to the present moment, especially during difficult or stressful times. I wouldn't even say especially. I already take that back. it's it's being mindful, sort of getting yourself off of autopilot and coming into the present moment. So mindfulness could be, I'm doing the dishes, and I do this a lot. So like, not that I do the dish. I mean, I do the dishes a lot. But let's say I use this example because when you're doing the dishes, that can be a very sort of like autopilot moment where you're just like doing the dishes. Who knows what you're thinking about? And that's the practice of mindfulness, is what am I thinking about right now? Because
Mhm.
when you allow your mind to just drift into the past, that's typically when anxiety comes up, is when we're thinking of the past. When we're thinking of the future, that's typically where depression lives. And that's just sort of the simple, like it's a sort of oversimplified way to sort of, I guess, explain this. Mindfulness, being in the present moment, that's where peace lives. Because you're safe, in that moment. Let's say if I'm just doing the dishes. When I bring my mind to what the task at hand is, that's mindfulness meditation. I start to think to myself, what does the water feel like? Is it warm? Is it cold? And then I just ask myself the questions. I say, what does it smell like? What does the soap smell like today? Or what is the feeling of the sponge? Is it rough? Is it soft? These are all sort of types of questions that can kind of get you out of autopilot, because autopilot might mean that you're drifting into the past, or you're drifting into the present, or sorry, into the future. And what we're trying to do with mindfulness is be mindful in the present moment, because that's where peace lives. And that's where you can go, oh, I'm at home and I can look around. I'm doing the dishes. I'm in peace. I'm in a safe space. I'm doing a task, like, and it just sort of, to me, that's the practice of mindfulness, is just sort of whether, and you can do it while you're sitting in a quiet room, maybe with some music, maybe not, maybe the ocean sounds, but it's that constant, the sort of common theme is the constant bringing your mind back to, let's say we're sitting, let's get away from the dishes for a moment. Let's say we're sitting and we just want to sit and we want to, sit up nice and tall, listen to some music, and maybe we set a timer for 5 minutes. It's when your mind starts to wander, and it will wander, that's what our mind does. And I want to be very clear and very honest about that, that your
Mhm.
mind will wander. There may be days where it doesn't as much, but when it does, the practice is catching it and going, oh, where have I been for the last few seconds? Let me bring it
Mm-hmm.
back to the rise and fall of my chest. Or let me bring it back to my breath. Is my breath shallow? Is it deep? How's the rise and fall of my chest? What does the air feel like around me? What are the sounds I'm hearing around me? And just sort of bringing you back to you in the present moment, sitting, lying down wherever you are. Maybe you feel like the mat or the carpet underneath you. What does it feel like? Is it warm? Is it cool? It's those sort of, and when you do that, your mind does become still. You don't have to ask yourself as many of those sort of like questions anymore. Eventually, this is you rewiring your brain. So there's this, I say new, like new in science, discovery that called neuroplasticity, which means that our brains, it's kind of like plastic. So our brains are moldable.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I discovered neuroplasticity, I went super like nerd out again, like went all in and was like, I want to be a neuroscientist. I need to do this for my life. I want to know everything about the brain. I want to study it. So instead of doing that, I took a couple of courses and just kind of read a couple of books. And the thing that I brought from that research and what I love about neuroplasticity, especially for someone who feels like what I felt years ago, and I felt stuck. I felt like, oh no, I have OCD and it's not going to change and I'm stuck with this. And I'm going to forever be fighting against fear and choosing to do something anyway, despite how fearful I feel. So it doesn't mean that you can, you can kind of do it anyway. You can be afraid and do it anyway. And then almost like for me, that practice of doing it anyway, almost like didn't validate the fear. And the more I did those things, it didn't mean that I wasn't fearful. Like traveling, for example, or getting on a plane, or like not washing my hands right after something, like and still eating something. Okay, what's the worst could happen? Well, I could tell you all the things that I could come up with, but I'm going to do it anyway. And then I go, oh, the worst things didn't happen. Okay. And it's sort of, that was my journey. Everyone's journey is very different. And I want to be really clear too that like definitely talk to a professional if this resonates with anyone, if
Mm-hmm.
you haven't yet, because there's so many different branches of OCD and different sort of like things that people have, but it's all fear based.
Mm-hmm.
And so, oh gosh, what was I say? Oh, neuroplasticity. So what they say is neurons that fire together wire together. And so, for example, if for 30 years or however long or however old you are, every time you think of an apple, you think of summer camp.
Mm-hmm.
The memory of summer camp comes up for whatever reason. Every time you think of an apple, summer camp is there. Those neurons have fired together and they've wired together. Like those two things are now in your brain, almost as if like I think of it as like a highway, like a street, or let's call it a river, because you can rewire your brain with practice. Every time you think of an apple, instead of thinking of summer camp, you can think of a peach. This is a very oversimplified way, but you know.
Mm-hmm.
So every time you think of an apple, this time try to think of a peach. Now, every time you think of that apple, it's summer camp's going to come up, but then you try to think of that peach and focus on the peach. Eventually, now think about a river that's been going for 30 years. And now you're trying to redirect that river to the peach. It is
Uh-huh.
going to take one little drop at a time, and it's going to take a long time to redirect a whole river to that peach, but it's not impossible. It just takes repetition and consistency. And every time that apple comes up, catching and going, oh, I'm thinking of summer camp again. Let me think about that peach. Okay, the peach is this, the peach is that, and then you breathe through it, maybe with meditation. And again, with yoga too, it's something that's so powerful because these thoughts, you're not without thoughts when you're doing yoga, but it's a little bit easier to redirect your brain when you're doing yoga because it's hopefully you're thinking of your posture and the cues that your teacher is giving you. And when your mind does wander, and I do like sort of say this in classes, if your mind's wandering, like when we're holding a plank, I'll go, if your mind is wandering, because I know it is, because mine is too. If it's going to your to-do list, bring it back to what does your mat feel like? what color are your fingernails right now? Or just different things that kind of bring you back to the present moment. I just nerded out on that. I don't know. I hope that answered your question.
No, yeah, and I've heard the whole analogy of like similar to the river. I mean, and I guess this is more geared towards like habit formation and how we get stuck in old habits just because we've been repeating that, a bunch over a period of time. But like picture like a path you're walking on, and obviously you're gonna automatically go towards the path that you see because it's been like, if you're hiking or whatever and people have been walking on this path for years, you're going to go that way. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's the most ideal path. It just means that it's been traveled the most, so it's like creating these new pathways
And when I
and
think, oh
yeah, go
yeah.
ahead.
So I was gonna say, when I think of that, I've never heard of that, but I love that. And when I think of that, think about taking the path that hasn't been walked on yet. You're gonna have to take down weeds. You're gonna
Uh-huh.
have to like clear the brush in order to walk. And that clearing in your mind is the tough work. It's the work that it's the negative emotions that come up that we've maybe never had to, or not had to, but have never really focused on or allowed ourselves to look at. And that
Uh-huh.
is uncomfortable. And it brings up anxiety or sometimes or like a speed up of the heart. And so, but it's the same thing of the path. Like when you go on a new path, it's not going to be totally perfect and like polished and ready for you to walk on. You're going to have to clear those weeds out before you can walk on it.
Yeah, it's uncomfortable, and I think the more we resist feeling uncomfortable, obviously that like the stronger the anxiety becomes, and the more power it has over us. So I think it's a really important practice. And okay, so this is going to be kind of like a harsh shift, but I know you wrote a book, and I'm just really anxious and curious to hear about it. And if it ties into this topic of meditation or if it's something totally different. So if you have anything to share about that, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, so I'm sort of when I was growing up, I was an athlete, and the sort of this like combination of like an athlete who, it's all about competition, and it's all about, sticking with your team and never giving up, and and then that sort of paired with my sort of perfectionist personality to just always be doing the best and always, that was something I learned later in life, was that like, oh, perfectionism isn't necessarily a great thing. Like it's gotten me to great places, but like it
Mm-hmm.
isn't necessarily like, there can be a balance. Like again, there's always a balance, And so I was always told, and everywhere I look is to never give up. Don't give up. Don't be a quitter. You don't want to be a quitter. Never give up. Grit, hustle culture. Like I could
Mm-hmm.
talk about, there's so many versions of that. Hustle culture, grit, never give up. All these motivators that are talking about like just keep pushing, wake up at 4 a.m. and just do it. And all these things. And that was my whole everything. I mean, that fueled everything for me, which is like never give up. I'm not giving up,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm, a competitive person. I'm someone who if I commit to something, I'm going to double down. I'm going to be the best at that thing I can possibly be. Well, the thing is though is that as I started like navigating my career, sort of my corporate career, or like, sort of professional career, I should say, um, I will never forget, they did this culture assessment like years ago when I was a graphic designer at a marketing department. And they were doing this sort of culture assessment for the company. And they said, "What's your life motto?" I was like 21 years old. And so I'm thinking like, I have a life motto? And I just said what came to mind. And I said, I guess my motto would be do what you love. And when you don't love it, don't do it. Sorry. I just my camera. Okay. So I thought to myself, I'll just come up, this is what comes to mind. Like for me, do what you love. And when you don't love it, don't do it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And the woman looked at me and goes, that was the most millennial thing I've ever heard. I was
Uh-huh.
like, oh, and I didn't know like the whole millennial thing, like no, like it hadn't like been like a
Yeah,
thing.
no one was
Like I
talking
didn't
about it
know like
yet.
we got so much shade for being millennials until like later. And so I was like, oh, I did. And now mind you, I'm like a very hard, dedicated worker. So I wasn't saying like give up and quit, but her reaction to that was so strong. And I just thought like, but why would you do something that you don't love to do? That
Right.
seems like a waste of time and a waste of your life because we only have one life. So now we're like fast forward, I've sort of crawled up the corporate ladder, and like I'm in an executive sort of position in the corporate world. And I wrote this book, and it's an adult picture book. So it's a very sort of quick read, and it's illustrated, and it's fun because first of all, it's like let's not take ourselves too seriously. It's so serious. It's like when we're an adult, when we're in the corporate world, everything's so serious and we take ourselves seriously. So I wanted to create this book that is about a woman who's in this sort of like cubicle. It's like over dramatized. It's got like the fluorescent lights, and like the dead plants and like the water cooler. And it's just sort of me calling BS on that sort of never give up mentality. The How to Be a Quitter book is sort of like my love letter to anyone who's ever stayed too long in
Hmm.
a job, a relationship, in a version of themselves that just no longer is fitting,
Hmm.
just because they thought quitting meant failing. So
Yeah.
that's what the book is about. I wrote it because I've been that person. I've held on to things that I should have let go. I've clung to this sort of safe path, the path that you just talked about, at the expense of my own peace, like
Yeah.
all throughout my life. And then every time that I finally sort of found the courage to walk away, something better was always waiting for me.
Hmm.
So that's the message that I want people to hear, is that quitting isn't giving up. It's choosing yourself. It's being mindful and intentional about, why does this no longer serve me? Why do I feel like this? Like sort of checking in with yourself. Am I happy? If you're not happy, now, I'm not saying, okay, go quit your job that you love, or I'm not saying, oh, go quit a relationship that's working well, but maybe just check in. Again, getting off of autopilot and ask yourself, is this what I really want to be doing? And what can I take? Can I take a small step to get to the place where I want to go? You don't have to quit tomorrow or anything without anything lined up, but just kind of giving you that permission slip to pivot is basically what How to Be a Quitter is all about.
That's so relatable, I think, and especially for, I mean, majority of my life was staying in things, in situations, jobs, relationships that weren't serving me at all. But it, like, I mean, like you, from a young age, I kind of learned, stick with it, don't quit. And I think a lot of us are told that growing up, and we do carry that into adulthood. And I think not until recent years have I learned the power of walking away from certain things that are no longer serving you in your life. And I think on the other side of that, you kind of are able to look around and reflect on all of the relationships that you do have, and pursuits of, happiness that you do have, and everything just feels so much more meaningful, and it's so much more sustainable, and it's just such a lighter way to live, I think. So yeah, I think that's a very relatable journey, especially for adults.
Yeah, it is. You see it everywhere. Now that I've said it, you'll probably see it like as you're scrolling, where it's like never give up, or let's hustle to 2025, whatever it is. There's never someone who's saying, look, you don't have to do this anymore. Like, or there's
Yeah.
very few people who are saying, look, you don't have to do this. And what I see too, like there's an opposite end of the spectrum that's happening right now, like on social media that I'm seeing, is there's these people who have allegedly like just quit their 9 to 5 and they moved to Italy, and now they're like, I don't know what they're doing. And I'm going, okay, again, let's talk about realistic. Like when we talked about
Yeah.
what is the realistic expectation of meditation or mindfulness? Like, we are not, I would love to be on a mountain somewhere where there's no distraction and I can just sit with my thoughts and just breathe, of course. Like that would be the perfect setting where we can just relax. And that's what yoga retreats are for, that I love, because you do get to like kind of, calm the nervous system, no outside distractions. But in real life, that's where the work is. Like the work is What happens when something uncomfortable comes up in my everyday life that I wasn't expecting, I didn't plan for? Okay, that's when the work starts. Let's check in. Is this a real threat? Is this something I'm afraid of? Why am I afraid of this? Is it what is it bringing up for me? And like, let's breathe through it. And, we're still in the present moment. There's no immediate threat, that kind of thing. Same thing with these people who, good for them. My
Mhm.
Philly just came out. Good for them. They moved to Italy, but but realistically, like, it's so easy for even me again to go, oh, I would love that. Like, part of me would love to just quit my 9 to 5 and just teach yoga forever and go on go to Italy and teach people yoga there, or run a little coffee shop. And not everyone has the luxury of doing that yet, but
Right.
maybe that's a goal that maybe you put. Like, I'm big on like visualization.
Uh-huh.
Like, I'll put my dreams or sort of like my goals on like my computer screen, like the what is that, your wallpaper, because like I'll see it every single day because I log into my computer every single day. And so that just gives me that, while I'm working, while I'm teaching yoga like part-time, and while I'm creating free meditation, guided meditation for people, because I want it to be accessible. I want people to find that same piece if they can that I did. And I don't necessarily, I want to kind of obviously give back, but then you have to pay your bills. I mean, that's the like
Yeah.
reality of it. And so while I'm, you know, making, sort of making a living, let's save up for the thing that might be the dream. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I would love to maybe do this thing, or maybe go ahead and be able to teach yoga full time. And but with yoga and stuff and meditation things, you build a following, and that takes time. It's like community. You have to, build. That's what I love so much about Highland Yoga. It feels very like a community. And the minute you just land on either the newsletter, the podcast, the website, it feels like this sense of community. And that's something I really love about yoga. As a yoga instructor, it's very hard to build that. Or it just takes a lot of time.
Oh yeah. I mean, everything takes time, and I think it's kind of like meditation or yoga practice. It's a lot of it's about the daily practice and like the mundane. That's what I like to write about so much, because it's like not every day is glamorous and beautiful, and we spend most of our lives in the day-to-day uh mundane, but it's about like finding lessons in that. And I think the more you can practice mindfulness, the more like certain little pieces of beauty shine through. And so I just find it kind of it's realistic, but it can be kind of fascinating too, I think.
I love that. I love what you said about finding the little pieces of beauty. I call those glimmers. Have you heard that term?
I
I
have.
love that term. I just saw it, like, I don't know, somewhere, and it was like the opposite of a trigger, where you
Yeah.
find these glimmers. Like when you're on your walk, I have a dog, so I walk 3 times a day, if I, or my husband will take him, but I will walk my dog and I look for glimmers, and I'll just happen to see like just something that's just that like reminds you that life is so sweet and good. And even your dog or your pets can teach you so much. Like if you observe them and they are just sniffing like these new flowers that were planted, and they're just sniffing them, and they're just like appreciating. And I'm going, "Ah, how sweet is that?" And like it reminds me to stop and just, that was a glimmer for me. Like even that of just the reminder to stop and literally smell the roses, like,
Uh-huh.
and just see like, oh yeah, they did plant some new plants, like because it's spring, and like, oh, and just kind of once you start to again tell your sort of like put it in your mind that you want to start seeing glimmers, you'll start to see them everywhere. It's
Hmm.
something that your brain does. Where, have you ever noticed like when someone, let's say, introduces you to like a new word, um and you'd never heard it before, and then all of a sudden you're seeing it on billboards, you're hearing other people in your network say it, and you're going,
Yeah.
how have I never heard this, since now I'm seeing it everywhere? Your brain is meant to put together patterns. So once
Uh-huh.
it hears something, it's like, oh, there's a pattern here, and I'm going to show you all the places where that exists to create this pattern for you. So now that you've heard of the term glimmer, for anyone who hasn't heard of it before, It's just like those little juicy moments of like someone holding open the door for like, an elderly person who's walking into the grocery store, or maybe even someone who's like taking the bags, or someone who goes, oh, hey, you dropped this. I mean, little tiny things that are just
Uh-huh.
like, oh, that's really nice. And, or I can't even think of any. I don't know if you've seen any lately, like that stick out. Like, I don't know if
I
there's a,
had the other day, I was sitting on my couch. I think I like turned the TV off and was about to go to bed, and I looked down at my phone and a song just popped up on my screen out of nowhere. Like I didn't even touch my phone, and then it started playing immediately. And then I, looked at the lyrics, and stuff like that happens
I
sometimes.
love those moments where you're like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm listening,
Yeah, you're like, oh, I should probably listen to the song now. uh
100%.
so yeah, I think just placing awareness on certain daily things can be really powerful. So you mentioned you have guided meditations out in the universe.
Yeah, so I do. I have on YouTube, it's called Journey to Peace. And I have a ton of guided meditations, anywhere from like visualization meditations, which I think are really good for beginners,
Mm-hmm.
because you're just sort of transported to a place, and you're sort of imagining, your brain is put to work in a way to where you can sort of meditate while you're imagining your garden or your forest or whatever it is. And through those types of meditations, I ask you to like look down at your feet or like look up at the sky and things like that. So I think that that's really helpful for people who are first starting out. I also have like 5-10 minute ones that super quick and easy. I say easy, super quick, I'll say. It
Mm-hmm.
depends on where you are that day and what's happening in your mind. um
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, those can be found on my YouTube channel, totally free. Even on Insight Timer, if anyone has that app, which is an awesome app, by
It's a
the
great
way.
app.
I have
Yeah.
a ton of guided meditations there as well. That if you prefer to just listen instead of like, you don't have to watch meditations on YouTube. Like I'm just sitting there. You don't have to like peek because I'm not doing anything other
Yeah,
than
yeah.
talking through it. So yeah, so those are all like free to, and just for, because I want people to discover that it can be, meditation doesn't have to be like what people say, like woo woo. It can be, it can be spiritual. It doesn't
Uh,
have to be like, it can just be you transporting yourself to like your happy place and just sort of sitting with your thoughts. But either way, it's going to start to rewire your brain in a really beautiful way and create a little bit of peace, a little bit of relaxation in your neurosystem,
yeah.
which is really good because again, when your body is calm, your brain will follow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like you mentioned with the visualization, I think if you think of like neuroplasticity, the more you practice visualizing like this place in your mind, and then the anxiety arises or whatever, and it's like the more you practice that meditation, the more you can easily tap into that when you need to, when it comes up. So it's just
I
like
love
being mindful of when that happens, and then so it really is such a practice, just like exercising your body or something like that, but
that.
for your mind. It's really
Ab-
cool stuff. Do you have any other things to share with us in terms of resources we can look
oh,
to?
let's
I
see.
say we, all of our community members.
Yeah, so you asked me sort of like if there's any like books or anything that I would recommend, and I kind of thought about it, like what books have I grabbed or do I gravitate towards or like reread, or people that I listen to. So I would say one book that I recommend is You Are Here by Thich Nhat Hanh.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if I'm totally like mispronouncing that or not, but it is a really great guide, and it's a short read to just sort of rediscover just this simple happiness of living in the present moment, which I think is like the theme of what me and you have been talking about a lot today. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a quick read. It's really great. I gravitate towards and always recommend giving Robina Corton a watch. That was the Buddhist nun that I talked about earlier. She does YouTube shorts and she has full talks as well. But YouTube shorts, some like just every morning she'll have just something about it is rooted in Buddhist practice. So if
Mm-hmm.
you're not into that, totally fine. But she just has very like philosophical kind of questions that might get you thinking, and maybe just think to yourself, like, what do I think about that? Or like, how does that make me feel when I think about that question? Um, And, I just really like to listen to people and read books from people who are dedicated to the practice of mindfulness and meditation, but can teach it to it, or like teach it and speak to it in a way that's real and relatable.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, like, sort of what you'll find on my YouTube channel is I have the scientific backing behind the different meditations. So like if you're ever curious, like what is happening in my brain, like actually, like scientifically, when I do this like visualization meditation, or when I do this like 10-minute meditation, I try to upload the scientific reasonings behind all the meditations for anyone who's just like me, who loves to know the why.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to go full, like, jump full, like 2 feet in and just go, no, I'm here for it. And I just want to listen to the meditations and find some peace. That's awesome too. But I just think that there's no rule book that says, that in order to rewire your brain, you have to sit cross-legged on top of a mountain somewhere. You
Uh-huh.
can really achieve this sort of beautiful sense of peace and gain really powerful tools to call on the days where you're not feeling so inspired, like you talked about. But yeah, those are kind of the two, the person in the book that I would recommend.
That's awesome. So remind me the teacher one more time.
Her name is
Robin
Robina. It's like
Robina. Okay.
Robina.
Okay. I had never heard her name before, so I'll definitely check
She's
that out.
cool because she was like this, evidently, her background, she was this woman in the 70s who like burned her bra and like was on these, protests and things. And like she has this like temper, like that she talks about, that like she's had to. So that's what I think is very cool, is that first of all, she's a woman, which I love to listen to women to, like, as much as, because obviously like in some in some industries, or what have you, it's overly saturated with men. So
Mm,
anytime I can find like a woman who has a really powerful voice and a way of storytelling and a way of teaching, I love it because I can relate. And as a woman,
mm,
so the fact that she has this past of, and she's totally not running from it. And that's another thing, that's like kind of to accept yourself, your full self, past, present,
mm,
future, is like another thing that is a whole practice in its own, that I think will be a lifelong practice probably for a lot of us. And to
mm,
forgive ourselves, is a whole beautiful thing that might take, again, continuously forgiving yourself and allowing yourself to move forward. But the fact that she embraces this part of her life where she was like, on the front lines of protests and all these things in the 70s, and she had this horrible temper and had this like resentment against her family and things like this because of her childhood. But she's a Buddhist nun, and she's talking
yeah.
like, look, from experience, she's talking about like, look, I didn't just grow up in like, again, like some people did, and look, that's fine if you grew up in a very calm, and maybe meditation was a part of your life, your whole life, and they become Buddhist monks, or maybe they just become yogis or meditation practitioners. But she didn't. And I love that. And that she just sort of like, through her meditation practice and through, some of these philosophical topics that she talks about, is very interesting. Because sometimes you, like, even for me, I listen to her all the time and I'll go, ooh, that's uncomfortable for me. Like, I don't know I don't know if I would adopt that for me, for myself. And
Mm.
that's okay. Like, I don't think you should take any one person's sort of, in
Teachings
my
as
opinion,
the truth. Yeah.
yeah, I don't think so. I say take from a lot of different people, and take what
Yeah.
resonates with you and what is true for you, and maybe learn a little as you go, and then make it your own.
Yeah. That's so powerful. I love that. Well, I think this has been a really awesome conversation, and I can't wait to check out your meditations. And it's been really cool to learn from you. And I hope to see you around sometime.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun. I love chatting with you, and yeah, I'll see you around. And I hope that whoever's watching, I hope you got something from it. Or if anything, just a little laugh here and there.
Absolutely. Thanks everyone for tuning in this week. We will see you next week on Find Your Flow. Thank you so much for tuning into the podcast. Your support really does matter. This podcast is produced by Highland Yoga with music by our very own teaching team member, Lauren C. If you want to learn more about Highland Yoga, visit our website at highland-yoga.com or email us to sign up for our weekly newsletter at info@highland-yoga.com. See you next week for more of Find Your Flow.